Hi, I want to do a video today on the satisfaction of tension. I've done videos like this before, but it's been more about deprivation and the pain of deprivation and the pain, outright pain of suffering, such as getting a nail stuck in your foot and trying to pull it out and the satisfaction of pulling the nail out. And I want to talk more about the tension side. It's more a way of looking at the subject differently than a different concept entirely. It's attacking the same subject matter, only we're looking at it from a different point of view when we use the different words. It's all a matter of semantics mostly. And I would say that the suffering thing and the tension thing with the suffering is more about the positive feelings of relief after a buildup of tension, a buildup of some kind of deprivation, a passion. And I've mentioned this before. First of all, let me go over this deprivation of suffering thing. The deprivation, the suffering, the pain of deprivation. It's the pain in and of itself in reaction to a negative circumstance where you find yourself deprived of something. And when you're deprived of this thing, sometimes your reaction in and of itself can be a negative feeling. Say not getting what you want for Christmas, so you have a panic attack. Well, you can't blame that the panic attack on you not getting what you want in Christmas. Obviously, there's a correlation there because it happened right after you didn't get what you wanted. But the pain in and of itself is something that exists on its own, sort of like the nail going into your foot. You can't blame because you didn't say you stepped on the nail instead of had a panic attack. Something that you can attribute, have a correlation to between the event and the deprivation, the thing that you didn't get, the anticipation of buildup based off of some kind of deprivation that you wanted this thing that you wanted for Christmas or for your birthday, and you stepped on a nail instead of having a panic attack. Well, you can't blame stepping on the nail other than the fact that things happened in the past and it led to where you are now based off of cause and effect on the pain that you're experiencing. The pain is in and of itself, such as you stepping on the nail, and it exists on its own no matter what. You can't blame what you didn't get for your birthday or Christmas or whatever, holiday you want to make up on. And you can't blame the nail stepping on the nail and feeling the pain of stepping on a nail. At least not entirely on the past events of you having this deprivation, that's dissatisfaction. Obviously, this feeling of deprivation and being disappointed obviously has more of you can attribute that to more of a reaction, like a panic attack from not having or getting what you want, having a temper tantrum, feeling completely and utterly unsatisfied with the experience that you're having. So the pain is in and of itself. Having the panic attack in it is obviously suffering in and of itself if you're experiencing it as a negative event. So I would say that the event is something that is in and of itself a bad event no matter what. And regardless of the thing that caused it, the deprivation, the unsatisfied deprivation, the pain of deprivation, obviously it's something that you can't attribute to the feeling, the process of being deprived and not getting the satisfaction that you want out of being unsatisfied and not getting what you want. So the pain, like a nail being stuck in your foot right after not getting what you want, in reaction to not getting, not necessarily in reaction, but stepping on the nail, or say you had intentions of stepping on the nail. It doesn't matter. The pain is in and of itself, and regardless of the dissatisfaction based off of a deprivation that you didn't get what you want, the pain is still there. It's still something that exists based on the event that caused the pain, as opposed to something that caused an event that caused the pain. So the event that caused the pain is entirely different than the event that caused the pain. So the pain event is obviously on its own regardless. And the pain of deprivation, sort of like eating, and like I said about how you're satisfied, it doesn't matter how you satisfy these desires. It's a matter of that you're satisfied. It doesn't matter as long as you eat the food that you have. And whatever you say, you can't go to the store today, so you have something in the refrigerator. You're not entirely satisfied and happy with what you have to eat, but you eat it. You're satisfied. You've satisfied your hunger. You're full, and it doesn't really matter once you look at it. It's a matter of beforehand, of how you satisfy. Before you satisfy it, it only matters. And that's why once you're satisfied, the thing that you wanted before, once you're not hungry anymore, once you're in a comfortable state of non-deprivation. It doesn't matter that you didn't have the thing that you wanted, so it didn't matter if you went to the grocery store or not today, because you satisfied your hunger with what you had and lived with what you had instead. So I want to talk about this tension thing. It's just a different way of looking at deprivation. It's a different point of view, I would say. and it has to do mostly with experiencing a tension, let's say a buildup, something like a sexual orgasm or something like that. That's a buildup. It's a tension based off of some kind of passion, based off of something. If there's a tension, there obviously has to be something that's making you feel deprived. The tension is a buildup, something that's depriving you. Say, like the satisfaction of positive satisfaction of experiencing some kind of climax, an orgasm or something. You obviously have to go through some kind of tension and in place of that to build up that satisfaction that you're having in the end. The more satisfying usually you pay off, you compensate with the experience, what you get in return. The goal that you have is obviously a compensation for what you had to go through, the deprivation you had to go through, the tension you had to go through, the build-up, the passion that you have. Obviously, the more you have passion, the more there's some kind of gap that's filling you, because the more you have passion, the more you feel like you have to, I'm just trying to think exactly what, the passion to push yourself, to feel like you need to satisfy something more, passion, a greater feeling, a greater emotional, I guess, emotions or anything, a greater drive to do something, a greater passion of feeling of satisfying something is more important when you're and it's obviously a deprivation. The more you have a passion for something, the more you have attention for something. Something like building up towards some kind of climax is obviously something that requires some kind of tension, a build up, some kind of deprivation in and of itself, such as attention building up. And that's something that's just as important as considering the pain in and of itself. This build-up is pain of deprivation. And the pain of deprivation, depriving yourself of something, is not exactly the same thing. How you can detach these feelings of active suffering, such as stepping on a nail, and the pain of deprivation, and the disappointment of satisfaction from not necessarily getting what you want based on the deprivation, sort of like pain. And once you feel the pain is separate from the thing that caused this. The pain is based off of some kind of deprivation, of dissatisfaction with some kind of outcome, is separate from some kind of is separate from the pain itself, the event that caused the pain. Sort of like the eating thing, the deprivation. Once you're satisfied, it doesn't matter how you got to your satisfaction. Once you are satisfied, it's just a matter of being satisfied and comfortable, not being deprivated anymore. So that's obviously an important distinction to make. And so the tension thing, yes, there's tension. There's positive tension, just right amount of tension. To say if you're too hungry, obviously it's not comfortable being too hungry. It's not comfortable having too much tension built up in your body, or in any kind of state of mind or anything. It's important to satisfy it, but not satisfy it not at such a great cost. Having the satisfaction of, say, a crude example I can use is holding in, having to go to the bathroom, holding in, having to go pee. The more you hold in, the more you suffer, the more you have that tension build up, the greater tension of having to go pee. You obviously have to go through a lot of tension, a lot of time has to go by. Obviously, if say you're distracting yourself, say I want to do this, why? There's no bathroom around, so I have to sort of distract myself. You may not get as much satisfaction. It requires a certain amount of suffering. It requires a certain amount of tension. And its state of mind, a recognition of this tension, an awareness of this tension. So you can't necessarily distract yourself, because that will take away from the compensation you might experience from the payoff that you might have in the end. So if you just sit there, say you're staring at the ceiling or looking at the wall, and you're just sitting there entirely focusing on the tension building up in your bladder, well, to say that's obviously going to have a greater payoff than not having. Then distracting yourself. Say you're drawing a picture or doing something to distract yourself from this tension of having to go pee. That will and probably and it's a psychological game. It's a matter of compensation. Your mind will recognize that the satisfaction is based off of this tension and this psychological recognition that you're satisfying a certain amount of deprivation that was existing in you. This deprivation, this feeling of pain, this feeling of tension, deprivation. I would say. Go one and one in certain parts, but yes, I think, yeah. And so this deprivation is this tension buildup. Obviously, requires an amount of suffering, and you're not necessarily always likely, but it's usually in turn you compensate for how much suffering you get in. So it's an equal and opposite kind of reaction. So it's the satisfaction. You're going up, the tension builds up, so you're going this way. It's sort of like pulling a string, then the string pulls up, and that's usually how much you're pulling the string slowly. It's hard, and it's really hard, and you have to pull with a great amount of effort to get the string all the way over here. but then right when you reach as far back as you're going to go, you release it and the spring goes fast and it slings forward. So that's pretty much the satisfaction. You get a great amount of pain, and the farther you go back, the harder you have to push the pull to bring it back. The faster, usually the faster it's going to go forward. And it's usually a fast reaction. Once it goes forward, it's extremely fast movement. So that's essentially the tension, pulling back, and that's all you're doing. And it's a slow process. It takes a lot of suffering, a lot of tension, and you get a very quick and immediate kind of satisfaction. Say like a sexual orgasm or going to pee. Sometimes you might have to say you wait an hour to go pee, and it builds up in you, and you recognizing you're concentrating on it. You're going to get more out of the satisfaction than the person that was sitting there distracting themselves from the pain. It's a psychological thing and a physical thing. It's a recognition. It's a psychological reaction, just as much as it is a physical reaction, because it's a recognition of the pain that you went through and the discrepancy between those two states. And it's obviously something that happens mentally and physically. And the satisfaction is usually brief and short-lived. And you're right back to pulling back. Once it goes back, once the string hits the wall, you're right back to pulling it again, doing different lengths and different how hard it is to pull it back and all sorts of things. And it's going to keep going back and forth and back and forth. Just sort of like the sex analogy thing I did in the video. It's really, you're just going in and out, in and out. You're going out to go, you come out to go in, you go in to go out, you go out to go in, you go in to go out. It's the constant thing. Only this is a little more detailed analogy where you're pulling back and it goes back and it's very brief, and then you're right back to pulling it very hard. And if it's a very brief one, then it's the satisfaction, the time it took you to pull it back, sort of like sticking your arm out for a long period of time, the satisfaction you have of finally having your arm rest is finally a satisfying thing. It depends on how long you had your arm out there. Sort of like an equal and opposite reaction, only that equal and opposite. The equal part is probably something that doesn't necessarily always hold true when it comes to this, but sort of like we're playing by the rules of physics, sort of like the equal and opposite reaction. We equally and opposite when we go through the pain. We equally, not necessarily equally, but opposite. We go in the opposite direction, not necessarily a positive, but we're back to the zero sum. We're back to the zero. We're back to the release of tension. So the equal and opposite reaction is we get right back, we're satisfied. Sometimes, but the satisfaction isn't necessarily a compensation for the pain, even though you may be right back to where you were. But it's obviously a scale that you can't necessarily put numbers on and gradients on. It's something that you just sort of have to recognize, oh, that was kind of satisfying, that wasn't that satisfying, but it must have been because there wasn't as much tension in me. But we can't necessarily know that necessarily all the time, but it's something you can generally get an idea of based on your own experiences. So I want to see if there's anything else I can mention. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else I can mention. I mentioned the deprivation thing, obviously, and the distinction between that and an event causing pain, not satisfying those pains entirely, and feeling deprived and not being satisfied. So the pain of deprivation, obviously a build-up and an equal opposite. It's a zero-sum game. There's nothing more to it, unfortunately. It requires an equal amount of suffering. You have to go about an equal amount of suffering to hopefully reach back to a zero, but you're not necessarily always going to reach back to a zero, at least in relationship, because you're always right next to another problem. It's like you satisfied this problem, but you're only at negative 20 instead of negative 1. We're never going to reach the zero. Zero is pretty much death. And when we're dead, we're not alive, so it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant then. And there's no we and us anymore anyway. There's no state of mind to experience any kind of pain. I guess you could say a zero is when you're sleeping, when you're still alive, having a dream. I don't know, something like that. So I would say that's obviously something that's important to make a distinction of. Equal and opposite reaction, but not always equal when it comes to the satisfaction. But maybe it is. It's just satisfying something that didn't necessarily have a... It satisfied, but the satisfaction itself, the satisfaction rate got you back to where you were, but the satisfaction itself wasn't as satisfying as all the tension buildup that was in you, the tension buildup that caused this kind of pulling and this deprivation that you had to experience to have that equal that satisfaction, to feel satisfying in the end, or at least as satisfying as it could have felt, but it didn't necessarily feel that way, or understand it, or experience it that way. So I think that's it. So I think I explained all the notes on the deprivation and the tension. It's like a string, and depending on how hard you pull and which string you choose, I'm sure there's all sorts of ways you can complete the analogy, but that's a general idea of pulling the string. The tension, the longer you pull it back, and the quicker, obviously, the longer you experience it, the longer it lasts. The farther you pull it back, the longer it lasts, but it's usually much briefer because the pulling is obviously some kind of pull and tug that is much harder than the satisfaction that quickly goes right back to the beginning. So yeah, I think that's it, and I guess that's all I need to say about this. I've babbled on long enough, so until next time, bye.